In this and the following lesson, we'll take a look more closely at the operation of natural selection. We're using the example of stick insects that evolved from an ancestral population that did not look like sticks, but natural selection will be changing this species over time so they become better fit to their local environment. The local environment has sticks and predators, and so a stick-like body is good camouflage. Now let's start to consider some of Darwin's questions as he pondered natural selection. In thinking about the selection process in nature, Darwin wondered how adaptations could improve over time. What would prevent a poorly camouflaged insect from mating with a better camouflaged insect, and so diluting the beneficial trait in the offspring? In other words, using our bracket diagram, why won't these two individuals mate and make offspring less camouflaged than one of the parents? Darwin had a simple and profound answer. The poorly camouflaged insects were more likely to be dead. So this would not be a very likely mating if predators were more often eating the larger insects, the ones with poor camouflage. So the action of predators then was creating a situation where you're not going to get the diluting effects of this mating here because one of those parents are less likely to be surviving than the other. Darwin argued that the evolution of traits like stick bodies happened over many generations. In each generation, the individuals with the best camouflage had more offspring. We're using our bracket diagram here to illustrate this process. Each generation, there's a struggle for existence. If there's variation that makes a difference to survival, the winners of the struggle will pass on their traits, and so the next generation, there will be an overrepresentation of those winning traits. Now, it raises another question for Darwin. Could being a little thinner really be the difference between life and death? And here Darwin's going to have to bite the bullet and say, yes, if adaptations are going to be evolving by this process, every generation there has to be some slight advantage to somebody over their competitors. Well, how could such a slight advantage really be an advantage? Well, let's put percentages on these stick insects. So we got some stick insects that look 10% like a stick and some that look 2%. And Darwin's going to argue that looking 10% like a stick is better than 2% under certain conditions. Now, in this picture here, if the bird lands right here, if the predator lands right here, and here's a 10% stick insect and here's a 2% one, you might say, well, can't the bird see both of them? So there's no advantage to being a 10% versus 2. But there might be other conditions in which it is an advantage. For example, if the predator's far away. If the predator were down here, looking in this direction or that direction, it just might be the case that the bird catches a glimpse of the prey over here and not over here. So if the predator's far away or moving, being 10% like a stick might just be an advantage over 2%. Or if there are low light levels. So here again, it might just be a slight advantage to be 10% like a stick versus 2. So Darwin's going to argue that even a slight survival advantage adds up over time. After many generations, the more stick-like individuals will be more numerous in the population. It's also important to note that individuals do not evolve, populations do. So individuals are born with the DNA that influences their traits. So the reason this one looks 10% like a stick is rooted in DNA mutations or some mixing of genes during sexual reproduction. This one looks 2% like a stick because of their differences in DNA. It is populations that evolve, right? So it's the action of predators here that is taking out some of the individuals and leaving others, and that's going to be changing the traits in the next generation, changing the frequency of those traits. Individuals are born the way they are due to their inheritance, and it's the action of the selection process and heredity that is leading the population to evolve. The winners in the struggle for existence each generation have a relative advantage. They are simply better fit to the environment than other individuals of that generation. They are not perfectly adapted to their environment each generation. So we want to think of this evolutionary process. It's not producing perfection, right? It's really just a game of relative advantage. Each generation, some of the individuals have to just have a slight advantage over others. And when you kind of extend that over large amounts of time, then you have the situation where you can get this evolutionary process happening. Individuals with the better fit traits will have more babies over time, and that will drive the evolutionary process. So it's a game of relative advantage. It's not that natural selection is producing perfection each generation, but over time, the population is getting more and more fit to its local environment. We can think of species change in two ways. The correct sort of understanding would be on the left, and a common misconception on the right. First, let's take the common misconception. Some students, early students of biology, sort of think about species change like this over here, that somehow all members of the species are somehow acquiring these beneficial traits. Notice that in this picture, we're showing that there's no variation in each generation, yet somehow the species is evolving the stick-like trait. The correct view is to capture variation each generation. And when there's variation, it means that there are going to be winners in the struggle. So the thinner individuals will tend to have more babies and pass on that trait, but there's still variation in the next generation. Nevertheless, the overall body shape is a little thinner than the previous one. Each generation, there are winners that pass on their favorite traits, and you get the evolution of the stick-like trait. So for Darwin, variation is the fuel for evolutionary change. Each generation, there are some individuals that have a variation that give them an advantage in the struggle for existence, and they pass on their traits. But again, each generation, there's more variation, and some individuals have a better suited traits to their environment, and so we get the evolution of the stick-like trait. Variation is the fuel for evolutionary change. The selection process is what's driving that process forward to produce species-wide adaptations. We can characterize this evolutionary process in graphical means here. So let's take the number of individuals in the population, and we'll do body shape down here on the x-axis. So in the early stages of this evolutionary process, the ancestors were on the large size, right? So here we have a distribution of individuals. Most individuals have a certain body shape, but there are going to be some individuals, a few individuals have even larger body size, fatter body size, and some individuals in that original population are a little thinner than average. It is these individuals on the tail here, they are maybe in the minority, but they have the relative advantage. So it's these individuals that will tend to have more babies and so pass on that thinner than average body to the next generation. Well, that means the average body shape in the next generation is going to be a little thinner than the average in the previous generation. So you see in the next generation, the red dotted line here, that's the characteristic population distribution. Most individuals are a little thinner than the average last time, but again, we'll have the tails down here. We'll have some fatter than average and thinner than average, and the same thing will happen. The thinner than average individuals will tend to have more babies, creating a shift in the next generation's curve. So what we get then over time is the average body shape is getting thinner and thinner. And it is the case that predators must be eating the poorly camouflaged individuals for better camouflage to evolve, right? Predators have to be taking out the poor camouflaged ones for this average change in body shape to be happening. So this process is only happening because predators are always eating the larger than average individuals and allowing some of the thinner than average individuals to survive. The selection pressures, like predators, are not trying to cause the evolution of better camouflage in their prey. They are simply trying to eat what they see. So again, there's no sort of intelligent process going on here. Certainly the birds, they don't want the stick insects to become better camouflaged, but nevertheless, their eating behavior is driving an evolutionary change in their prey. Now, if there were no predators, body shape, so the camouflage, would not make a difference to survival. The population would not evolve stick-like bodies. So again, if there were no predators, it wouldn't matter what your body shape was. You could reproduce and have offspring. So there would be an equal chance of survival here if we're just restricting our view to the action of predators. So again, if there's no predators, you're not going to be getting this shift in the curve over time. And finally, selection is trait specific. So in this case, predators are influencing body shape, but not digestion efficiency or immune function or fertility, etc. So for instance, this larger bug down here might have had a really good immune system. This one here maybe was a really efficient eater. Oh, but their body shape made it so that they were easily seen by the predators. So the action of the predators is affecting body shape only. There are lots of other traits that are evolving as well, but they're evolving due to other selection factors. So, for example, diseases in the environment might be causing the evolution of better immune systems, but the predators are not affecting immune systems. Rather, the predators are affecting body shape.